Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. The moment my wife sat me down, I knew something was coming. Not because of some sixth sense or gut instinct, but because I had seen this exact kind of setup before. The overly casual smile, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, and the nervous energy humming beneath her skin. It was all too familiar. She was preparing to drop a bomb. I leaned back in my chair, setting my beer down on the table, and waited. "Listen," she started, her voice overly sweet, almost rehearsed. "I've been thinking a lot about us." There it was, the beginning of some half-baked justification for whatever she was about to say. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "I love you," she continued, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I really do, and I don't want to lose what we have." That sentence alone told me everything. She wasn't planning to leave. No. She wanted something worse. "But I also feel like I need to explore things," she added, her fingers tapping anxiously against the table. Experience different connections. Meet new people. I gave her nothing. No reaction. Just a slow sip of my beer as I watched her squirm. "So, what are you saying?" I finally asked. She exhaled, relieved that I was engaging instead of outright rejecting her. "I want us to open the relationship," she said softly, eyes searching my face for a flicker of agreement. "Not because I don't love you, but because I think we could grow from this. Maybe we could even be stronger in the long run." I could see she had convinced herself this was some enlightened, modern approach to marriage. That I'd nod along, say something about trusting her, and let her run off into the arms of some other man while keeping me securely in her back pocket. But I wasn't stupid, and I sure as hell wasn't about to play that game. I tilted my head. "So, you want to date other men?" She bit her lip but nodded. "Yes, but it's not about replacing you. It's about—" I held up a hand, cutting off whatever nonsense she was about to say next. "All right," I said. Her eyes widened in surprise. "All right?" "Yeah," I shrugged, taking another sip of beer. "If you want to see other men, that's fine. But I should probably do the same, just so I have a basis for comparison." The color drained from her face. What do you mean?" she asked, voice suddenly small. "I mean," I said slowly, "if you're going to be out there meeting new guys, then it's only fair that I get to do the same. That way, I can really evaluate how you measure up to other women." She flinched. It was subtle, but I caught it the moment the script flipped in her mind. She had expected me to be the understanding husband, the reliable, docile fallback. She had pictured me sitting at home while she explored her connections with other men, confident that I'd always be there when she got bored. But I had just shattered that illusion. "You'd compare me?" she asked, her voice laced with something I hadn't heard in a while. Actual insecurity. I nodded. "Well, yeah. How else would I know if I'm really getting the best deal here?" Her jaw clenched, but she tried to hide it behind a forced smile. "That's not what this is about," she said quickly. "It's not a competition, isn't it?" I countered. "You're saying you need to explore to see if you're missing out on something better. That means logically there's a scale, a way to measure what you're gaining or losing. If you get to evaluate me against other men, it only makes sense that I do the same with other women." She blinked. I don't want you to see other women." I smiled. "Oh? Why not?" "Because this isn't about that," she argued. She hesitated, trying to find the right words. "I just want to expand my experiences. But that doesn't mean I want our relationship to change." I let out a low chuckle. "You want to sleep with other men but keep me exactly the same?" She swallowed hard. "It's not just about sex." "Of course it is," I said bluntly. "You wouldn't be asking for this if you didn't have someone in mind already." That one hit the mark. Her face paled for a split second before she composed herself. "That's not true." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Who is he?" She froze. What?" I tilted my head. "You're not asking for an open relationship because you might want to date other men. You're asking because you already have someone lined up. So, who is he?" She bit her lip again, hard. A nervous tick. "That's not fair." Life's not fair, I said, standing up. You just thought you'd get away with making the rules. Turns out you don't like them when they apply to you too. She shot up from her seat, a spark of frustration in her eyes. This isn't how I wanted this to go. I smirked. Yeah, I bet. She crossed her arms. So what? You're just going to throw away everything we have, because I wanted to have an honest conversation? I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I said, no, I'm not throwing anything away. You are. She inhaled sharply. And in that moment I could see it, the panic, the realization that she wasn't as in control as she thought. This wasn't going to go the way she planned. Not even close. The silence between us stretched like a taut wire. My wife's expression was unreadable, but the way her fingers tightened around her glass of water gave her away. She wasn't just uncomfortable, she was unraveling. She thought she had the upper hand, that she could introduce her grand open relationship idea and control the terms. But my simple counter, comparing her to other women, had turned the tables in a way she hadn't anticipated. I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes as she struggled to process what this meant for her. I don't understand why you're saying this, she said, voice carefully measured. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's just about having different experiences. I leaned back, swirling the last bit of my beer in the bottle. Sure, I said casually. I get that. And you know what? Maybe I've been too closed-minded myself. Maybe I should see what's out there too. You know, just so I can fully appreciate what I have at home. Her mouth opened, then closed. That's not the same. How's it not the same? Because she stopped, shaking her head. I just don't want to risk us losing what we have. I laughed at that. A real, genuine laugh that had her flinching. Risk? You're the one who suggested this, not me. You already put what we have on the chopping block. I'm just saying if you want to explore, it's only fair that I do the same. Why should you be the only one to see if there's something better out there? The color drained from her face. I let the words hang in the air, letting her soak in what she had just set in motion. For the first time in a long while, she looked uncertain. That's when I knew I had flipped the script. The first signs of panic. Over the next few days, something changed in her. She was suddenly more affectionate, her kisses lingering a little longer, her touches more intentional. She'd come home early from work, something that hadn't happened in months. She even started dressing differently, not in a flashy way, but subtly more conservatively than before. I pretended not to notice. The first real crack in her confidence came one evening when she found me in the living room casually scrolling through my phone. Who are you texting? She asked. I raised an eyebrow. Why do you care? She hesitated. I was just asking. Just a friend, I said, smirking slightly. Why? You worried I'm comparing? Her breath hitched. I could see it, the battle raging in her mind. She had thought I'd crumble, that I'd beg her to reconsider, that I'd fight to keep her. Instead, I was playing along, and it terrified her. Later that night, she tried to initiate intimacy. It was out of nowhere, forced, like she was trying to reclaim something. I turned her down. The shock on her face was priceless. But you always want to, she murmured, sitting up in bed, confusion clouding her features. I just shrugged. Not in the mood. She didn't sleep well that night. The other man and the hidden truth. By now, I had little doubt that she already had someone in mind when she suggested opening the relationship. Women don't bring these things up out of nowhere, they test the waters, gauge reactions. She had probably been lining something up for weeks, maybe months. So I did what any man in my position would do. I started digging. She wasn't reckless, but she wasn't as careful as she thought either. A few password resets, some location tracking, and a well-placed friend in IT later, and I had a name, Ethan. A coworker. Single. A little older than me. Not a stranger, but someone I had met before at one of her company's events. A guy I had shaken hands with, made small talk with, while he was probably already thinking about sleeping with my wife. The anger was there, bubbling under the surface. But I forced it down. This wasn't about rage. This was about control. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I let her think I was still playing along with her little game. And then I made sure she got a taste of her own medicine. The moment of doubt. A week later, I casually mentioned that I had plans for the evening. Plans, she repeated, stirring her coffee a little too forcefully. Yeah, I said. Just grabbing a drink. A friend of mine wants to introduce me to someone. The spoon clattered against the side of her mug. You're going on a date? I smiled. Wouldn't call it a date. Just seeing what's out there. She swallowed hard. I could almost see her mind spinning, calculating. She had never expected me to take her suggestion seriously, at least not in a way that benefited me. That night, I walked out the door without giving her a second glance. I wasn't meeting anyone. But she didn't need to know that. When I got back, she was awake, waiting. "How was your night?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Good," I said simply. Her grip on the couch cushion tightened. "Did you meet someone?" I let a slow smirk creep onto my face. "Why do you care?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in this entire ordeal, she was on the receiving end of uncertainty. The power dynamic fully shifts. The days that followed were tense. She started texting me more, asking where I was, what I was doing. She cooked my favorite meals, wore the perfume she knew I liked, but I never gave her the validation she was craving. I let her sit in that uncertainty. And just like that, the dynamic of our marriage had changed. She had thought she could control the narrative. Instead, she was watching it slip through her fingers. And I wasn't going to stop it. Not yet. Something was different about her now. The smugness, the self-assurance gone. In its place? Desperation. She tried to hide it behind forced smiles, behind awkward attempts at rekindling something that had already burned to ash. But I saw through it. Every touch, every lingering glance, every overly affectionate gesture, it was all fueled by the same thing. Fear. She was afraid. Not of losing me necessarily, but of losing control. For weeks, she had been so sure that I would play along, that I would sit obediently in the background while she explored. But now I was the one exploring. Or at least she thought I was. And it was driving her insane. The first slip. It happened over dinner. She had gone all out, home-cooked meal, candles, even the expensive wine we had been saving for a special occasion. I played my role well, pretending to be oblivious to her sudden change in demeanor. "So," she said, twirling her fork between her fingers, "who is she?" I looked up from my plate, feigning confusion. "Who?" She laughed, forced, unnatural. "Come on. The woman you went out with the other night. The one you've been texting." I let a smirk play at my lips. "Why does it matter?" Her grip on her fork tightened. "Because I think it's ridiculous that you're actually—" She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. "I just think we need to be careful with all this." "All this?" I echoed. "You know what I mean." She shifted in her seat, looking everywhere but at me. "We don't want to make decisions we'll regret later." I sat back, watching her squirm. "You mean like opening the marriage?" She flinched. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. Maybe we rushed into this." There it was. The first sign of backpedaling. She wanted out. But I wasn't going to let her take the easy way. Ethan panics. The next day, I got confirmation that her little side piece was feeling the heat. A blocked number called my phone 3 times before I finally answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then, a voice I recognized, Ethan. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight. I smirked. "We do." A sharp breath on the other end. "Listen, man. I don't want any trouble." I didn't know. "Didn't know what?" "That you knew," he admitted. "She told me it was complicated. That you guys were working through things." I never. Stop talking. He fell silent. "I don't care what she told you," I said evenly. "What matters is what's happening now. And what's happening now is that she's realizing she made a mistake." Another breath. Are you gonna tell her you know?" I chuckled. "What do you think?" Silence. Then, in a strained voice, "She's been different lately. Distant. Jumpy. I think she's second-guessing everything." Of course she was. "Not my problem," I said. "Look, I just want to be clear, I don't want this blowing back on me." That's what he was afraid of. That's why he called. He didn't care about her. He cared about himself. Coward. "I guess we'll find out," I said, then hung up. She breaks. That night, she lost it. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, pretending to text someone, when she stormed into the room. "Who is she?" she demanded. I didn't look up. "What?" She grabbed my phone, yanking it from my hands. "You heard me," she snapped. "Who is she? Who have you been seeing?" I leaned back, watching her as she scrolled through my messages. Of course, she wouldn't find anything. I was never actually texting anyone. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she was unraveling. "You really don't like this feeling, do you?" I mused. She looked up, anger and confusion warring in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" I stood up, towering over her. "The uncertainty. The doubt. The fear that maybe you're not as irreplaceable as you thought you were." She swallowed hard. "You were fine when you thought I'd sit back and let you have your fun," I continued. "But now that the shoe's on the other foot, now you can't handle it." Her breath hitched. I leaned in slightly. "Tell me, did you ever actually want an open relationship? Or did you just want to cheat without consequences?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I nodded. That's what I thought. The final card. I let her stew in her own panic for another 2 days before I made my final move. She came home from work to find an envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. Inside, every message between her and Ethan. Every hotel reservation. every call log, and a drafted separation agreement. She walked into the living room, the envelope clutched in her shaking hands. "You knew," she whispered. I took a sip of my drink, setting it down carefully. "Of course I knew." Tears welled in her eyes. "Since when?" I shrugged. "Long enough." She inhaled sharply. "So, what now?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah? You have a choice. You can sign that agreement and walk away with dignity. Or you can fight me on this and make things a lot worse for yourself." Her face crumpled. "I don't want to lose you." I chuckled darkly. "Funny. You didn't seem too worried about that when you were with him." A sob racked her body, but I didn't care. She had expected me to sit back and accept being second place. Instead, I made her realize she was never first. She stood there, clutching the envelope, her knuckles white as she scanned the damning evidence inside. Her face had gone pale, her body trembling not just from shock, but from the weight of realization. She had lost. Her carefully constructed fantasy had shattered around her, and now there was no escape. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "I can fix this." I almost laughed. "Fix what?" She swallowed hard, desperation bleeding into her voice. "Us. Us." I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You mean the us that you were willing to throw away for Ethan? The us that you didn't seem to care about when you were planning your little adventure?" Her breathing hitched. "I wasn't trying to replace you. You just wanted me to sit in the background waiting for you to get bored," I said flatly. "You wanted a safety net. You wanted to see if there was something better while keeping me on standby just in case there wasn't." Her silence confirmed everything I already knew. She had expected me to beg, to plead, to try to win her back. Instead, I had let her fall on her own sword. The last attempt. She tried one last time. Her voice softened, a familiar warmth creeping back in. "I was stupid. I see that now. I don't want anyone else, just you." I shook my head. "No, you don't get to say that." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why not?" "Because," I said, my tone cold, "you weren't saying it before you realized I could replace you." A sob ripped from her throat. I cut her off. "You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it, alone." She broke then, tears streaming down her face as she fell into a chair. She never thought this would happen. She had believed she had all the power, that I would always be there, that no matter what she did, I would cling to the idea of us. She was wrong. And now she was facing the consequences. The affair partner falls apart. As expected, she wasn't the only one panicking. Ethan was just as desperate. The next morning, I got another call. "I swear, man, I didn't mean for this to happen," Ethan stammered the second I answered. "I thought she was serious about opening the relationship. She said you were okay with it." I chuckled. "So, you're saying you believed a married woman who wanted to cheat on her husband?" A beat of silence. "I didn't know she'd fall apart like this," he admitted, his voice strained. "She showed up at my place last night crying. She said you were divorcing her and that it was my fault." I smirked. And I can't have this blow up in my face." His voice cracked. I have a reputation. I work with her. If this gets out." I cut him off. "Then you should have thought about that before you slept with another man's wife." He exhaled shakily. "Look, man, I don't want trouble. Can we make some kind of deal? Maybe you don't go through with the separation? Maybe we—" I hung up. The final nail in her coffin. Later that day, I handed my wife the official separation agreement. She stared at it, eyes hollow, fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. "I don't want this," she whispered. I leaned back. "It's not up to you anymore." She had wanted choices when she suggested opening the marriage. Now she had none. Her voice broke. "I can't do this without you." I tilted my head. "You thought you could though, didn't you?" A sob tore through her. "Please, let's work this out. I'll cut Ethan off. I'll prove to you that I still love you." I smiled. "You already proved everything I needed to know." Her breath hitched. "You thought you had the upper hand," I continued. "That I'd be too weak to walk away. That I'd be waiting for you to decide whether I was good enough to keep." She squeezed her eyes shut. "But guess what?" I said. "I already made the decision for you." She collapsed. She knew it was over. The power was gone. She had spent so much time evaluating me, thinking she could compare me to other men, never realizing I could do the same. And now, she was facing the truth she never expected. She didn't measure up. The aftermath. I moved forward with the separation. She tried to stall, tried to fix things. But it was too late. I wasn't playing her game anymore. She lost more than just me. Her affair partner cut her off, too scared of the consequences to stay involved. She lost the home, the stability, everything she had taken for granted. She wanted to explore her options. And now, she had no choice but to live with them. And me? I moved on. Not out of revenge, not out of spite, but because I knew my worth. And I knew one thing for certain. She was never worth comparing to anyone else. She was never even in the running. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.